Listen to the sound of pure history being made, thousands of voices roaring in absolute unison, a massive sea of blue, red, white, and yellow flags waving fiercely under the bright European sun. You hear that deafening noise, and you might immediately think this is a packed arena in the heart of Manila. But you would be entirely wrong. This is the Foro Italico. This is right in the center of Rome in the year 2026, and the eye of this massive emotional hurricane is none other than Alex Eala. What we are witnessing right now is not just another tennis match or a lucky day on the court. It is the absolute pinnacle of Philippine sports in the modern era. People traveled from all over the continent just to witness this exact moment. Alex Eala just walked onto one of the most prestigious clay courts in the world and completely shattered every single doubt the Western sports media ever dared to throw her way. The world is watching a 20-year-old girl completely rewrite the entire DNA of Asian tennis before our very eyes. But the truth is, you cannot fully appreciate the sheer magnitude of this triumph just by looking at the final scoreboard. You cannot understand what dominating a relentless veteran like Magdalena Frech truly means unless you know the hell Alex had to walk through to get here. We have to rewind the tape. We need to leave the glorious sunshine of Rome and go back to a time before the top 40 rankings became a reality. We have to look at the young girl who is drowning under a mountain of unfair expectations. The distance between that vulnerable teenager and the fierce warrior standing victorious in Italy is staggering. It is a journey built on silent tears and exhausting battles that the television cameras never bothered to capture. How exactly did she claw her way out of that dark place to stand on top of the world today? Carrying the burning hope of over 100 million people on your bare shoulders is never an easy privilege. For Alex, it was an incredibly heavy burden from the very first day she picked up a racket on the professional stage. She was heavily branded as the chosen one by everyone watching back home. Imagine being a teenager and waking up every single day knowing an entire nation is intensely watching your every step. When you are that young, your mind is still forming. You are still trying to figure out who you are as a human being. But Alex did not have the luxury of time or privacy. Every single time she swung a racket, it was breaking national news. Every minor unforced error was aggressively magnified and endlessly debated by critics online who had never stepped foot on a professional court. The transition from being a celebrated junior champion to surviving the ruthless meat grinder of the professional WTA Tour is notoriously brutal. It is a terrifying place where teenage prodigies are routinely eaten alive by seasoned veterans. The pace of the ball is blindingly fast and the spin is heavier than anything you see in the junior ranks. The physical toll on the body is relentless, dragging players into hours of agonizing rallies under the scorching sun. And the opponents on the other side of the net absolutely do not care about your national pride or your promising future. They only care about breaking your spirit to advance to the next round. Alex felt this suffocating pressure constantly pressing down on her chest. The Western analysts were painfully quick to judge her early struggles on the senior circuit. They heavily questioned her stamina and her physical limits. They aggressively debated if a player of her stature possessed the raw physical strength and mental toughness required to survive the grueling 10-month schedule of modern tennis. They wanted her to be a finished masterpiece before she even had a chance to mix her colors on the palette. That kind of relentless global scrutiny creates a very dark and lonely room in the mind of an athlete. You start playing not to win, but to avoid disappointing everyone who believes in you. You start questioning if the crushing expectations are just a cruel setup for a massive public failure. Yet, right when the noise became absolutely deafening, she made a quiet but profound choice. She looked at the terrifying reality of professional tennis and she chose not to shrink. She chose to face the intense fire directly instead of hiding behind the comfortable excuse of her youth. It is incredibly rare to witness someone so young refuse to break under that specific kind of blinding national spotlight. She absorbed the negativity, the harsh comments, the brutal losses, and slowly started transforming all of it into a strange kind of high-octane fuel for her ambition. But the universe has a very cruel way of testing people just when they think they have finally found their solid footing. Right when the millions of fans back in the Philippines started to confidently believe her trajectory was finally stabilizing, the real storm was just gathering strength. The most brutal and heartbreaking chapter of her career was waiting quietly just around the corner. If you have ever felt the crushing weight of people expecting way too much from you, then you know exactly the kind of silent battle Alex was fighting every single night in her lonely hotel room. Tell me in the comments below if you have ever had to carry a heavy burden like that, because understanding that exact feeling of suffocating pressure is the only way you will truly believe what happens next. The Western sports media has always harbored a deeply ingrained and incredibly harsh skepticism reserved specifically for young Asian talents. They look at the physical metrics and immediately start drawing rigid boundaries around what they believe is scientifically possible. The articles and the television commentary from top pundits all started echoing the exact same cruel narrative. They confidently claimed she lacked the explosive physical strength to survive a brutal three-set match on the slow European clay. They questioned her raw power when standing baseline to baseline against the towering heavyweights of the professional tour. They openly debated if her physical frame could withstand the punishing physical grind of the top-tier tournaments, or if she was biologically destined to break down completely under the relentless stress. How many brilliant young Asian prodigies have we watched crumble under this exact same psychological crushing weight before? The history of professional tennis is literally littered with the broken dreams of brilliant teenagers who burned incredibly bright for one single summer and then vanished completely into total obscurity. The loneliness of the professional tennis circuit during this specific dark period was absolutely suffocating. Imagine sitting alone in a quiet, sterile hotel room in a foreign country after a devastating first-round loss. There are no cheering crowds in those small, remote qualifying tournaments. There are no national television cameras documenting the exhausting physical therapy sessions or the silent tears shed over a blistering foot. There is only the hollow echo of the tennis ball hitting the strings inside an empty arena and the crushing weight of those harsh Western critiques playing on a continuous loop in her young mind. Every single time she stepped onto the court, the pressure was no longer just about winning a simple tennis match. It was about frantically trying to prove her own fundamental worth to a world that was already preparing to write her off as a minor footnote in sports history. The psychological darkness that surrounded her right before the major European clay swing was thick and incredibly heavy. She suffered a brutal string of heartbreakingly close losses that nobody wanted to talk about. We are talking about agonizing, final set tiebreaks that slipped through her trembling fingers at the absolute last possible second. These narrow defeats were rapidly draining her mental reserves and aggressively chipping away at her core confidence. She was giving absolutely everything she had inside her soul, but the actual tournament results were just not translating to the main draw of the big, prestigious events. The physical toll was another terrifying silent enemy. People watching at home do not realize how the brutal travel schedule actively destroys the human body. Waking up in different time zones every single week and dealing with minor, nagging injuries that never truly heal because the tour never stops moving forward is a nightmare. The Western media love to point out these physical vulnerabilities. They painted an unfair picture of a fragile player who simply lacked the biological durability to survive the modern game. The quiet whispers of doubt were aggressively growing into a loud and completely unavoidable roar. People back home and experts abroad were genuinely starting to wonder if the magical Cinderella story of Alex was going to end prematurely right then and there. They were ready to permanently stamp her with the frustrating label of a mere child prodigy who simply could not handle the massive leap into the grown-up world. Many highly respected tennis experts confidently predicted she had already hit her absolute permanent ceiling. They declared the hype was officially over, until the bright, blinding sun of Rome 2026 finally pierced through the dark clouds and illuminated the legendary red clay of the Italian Open. Stepping onto the sacred dirt of the Foro Italico at exactly 20 years old changed absolutely everything about her trajectory. The age of 20 is a very specific and critical milestone in the harsh world of professional tennis. It is the exact definitive moment when the forgiving and protective excuse of youth is permanently stripped away from you. You are no longer the cute rising star with potential. You are finally judged as a complete professional adult who must deliver tangible results on the biggest stages. Alex walked onto that historic court in Rome, not as a hopeful young apprentice quietly asking for permission to belong, but as a hardened, furious warrior demanding her rightful territory. And waiting right on the other side of the net was none other than the incredibly formidable Magdalena Frech. Facing Frech is the absolute ultimate grueling physical and mental test for any rising player on the tour. She is a relentless and crafty veteran who makes her living by completely destroying the established rhythm of younger opponents. She drags them into deep, miserable tactical waters and watches them slowly drown in their own unforced errors. Let us talk about the severe conditions on that specific day in Rome. The sun was beating down mercilessly on the red clay, making the court incredibly slow and physically demanding. Every single step required maximum effort because the heavy clay sticks to your shoes and makes your legs feel like they are encased in solid concrete. This is exactly the kind of harsh, punishing environment where experienced European clay court specialists normally devour young international challengers alive. The prominent Western analysts immediately predicted a swift and highly educational defeat for the 20-year-old challenger. They expected the veteran to completely expose the inexperience of the young Filipina on the slow, unpredictable surface. But they completely missed the subtle and brilliant tactical genius unfolding right in front of their very own eyes. Alex completely flipped the established script by deliberately slowing down the frantic pace of the match. Instead of foolishly trying to match the raw, flat baseline power of the older veteran, she started utilizing devastating heavy topspin to violently push Frech far behind the baseline. She was painting the corners of the court with incredible, chilling patience. The sheer emotional maturity required to execute that kind of suffocating and highly disciplined strategy under the scorching Roman heat and immense pressure is incredibly rare. Let me pause right here and ask you a serious question because this specific tactical shift blew my mind completely when I watched the tape. Did you ever expect a 20-year-old player under that much pressure to outsmart an experienced veteran using such a deeply calculated and patient strategy instead of just relying on pure, youthful speed and raw panic? Tell me exactly what you think about this brilliant tactical evolution in the comments down below, because noticing these tiny, brilliant adjustments is what separates the true hardcore tennis fans from the casual observers. Now let us get back directly to the sheer chaos of that deciding third set, because the tension in the stadium was rapidly reaching an absolute boiling point. Every single grueling rally felt like a heavyweight boxing match going into the final bloody championship rounds. The players were trading vicious blows and gasping for pure air. Alex was incredibly stubborn and absolutely refused to yield a single inch of the baseline territory. She was returning devastating wide serves that would have easily broken her spirit and forced an error just one calendar year ago. The score kept ticking higher and higher, and the tension in the Italian stadium was so incredibly thick, you could physically cut it with a knife. The crowd in the arena began to sense that something truly special was happening right in front of them. They started to realize they were not just watching a regular tennis match, but witnessing the violent birth of a genuine global superstar. Then came the magical, unforgettable moment that will forever be permanently etched into the history of Philippine sports. Match point. You absolutely have to listen to the sheer violence of that final decisive forehand strike. Hear the sharp, loud crack of the tennis ball exploding off her strings, followed instantly by the absolute deafening eruption of the massive crowd. The broadcast camera cuts rapidly to the yellow ball landing perfectly on the white chalk line, and then instantly pans to Alex, dropping completely to her knees on the red clay. The massive adrenaline energy spike in that arena in that exact fraction of a second was enough to power an entire European city. The raw emotion pouring out of her shaking body was years of suppressed frustration finally escaping into the wild. She buried her face in her hands as the massive reality of the achievement washed over her exhausted body. The stadium announcer screamed her name into the microphone, and the sound echoed across the ancient, glorious city of Rome. That final violent swing of the racket did not just defeat a massive top-tier opponent on a random Tuesday afternoon. It completely destroyed every single ounce of Western prejudice and institutional doubt that had unfairly haunted her entire career for years. The entire Roman stadium instantly transformed into a massive roaring ocean of blue, red, white, and yellow. Thousands of overseas Filipinos had completely taken over the historic venue. They painted the Italian stands with their bright national colors and turned a massive European clay court into a loud, passionate home game for a young Asian star. We are talking about hardworking people who traveled on trains and buses across the entire continent of Europe just to witness a tiny piece of history in the making. Men and women were weeping openly in the stands while waving their flags with absolute, pure, unadulterated pride. It was a beautiful, breathtaking cultural takeover happening right in the middle of Italy. The sheer volume of their collective support completely swallowed the stadium whole. When Alex hit a winner, the deafening explosion of joy literally shook the ancient foundations of the Foro Italico. Magdalena Frech did not just play against one 20-year-old girl that day, she had to fight against an entire fiercely proud nation that absolutely refused to let their champion fall. The energy was so incredibly thick and electric that you could feel it buzzing through the television screen all the way back in Manila. Now pay very close attention because I am going to reward you for sticking around this long. I am going to reveal exactly how she actually pulled off this massive upset on a deeply technical level. The mainstream television broadcast completely missed this crucial detail because they were too busy focusing on the emotional narrative. If you look closely at the tape of Alex playing when she was 19, you will notice her forehand motion had a slightly longer, loopy windup. That extra fraction of a second in the backswing was exactly what allowed experienced veterans to rush her and crush her defensive rhythm on fast points. But walking into Rome at 20 years old, she unveiled a completely restructured weapon. She shortened the backswing considerably and generated all the terrifying explosive power directly from her heavy hip rotation and her strong core. This tiny but incredibly brilliant biomechanical adjustment allowed her to take the heavy ball incredibly early on the rise. You have to understand that on slow European clay, taking the ball early is the ultimate sign of absolute, supreme confidence. That specific physical evolution completely neutralized the heavy defensive slices of Frech and violently locked the veteran down in the deep back corners of the court. She literally rewired her own muscle memory to become a relentless apex predator on the dirt. It is a tactical masterclass that takes most players an entire decade to learn, but she mastered it in a single offseason. That staggering technical brilliance did not just win her a single glorious match. It violently launched her straight toward the elite top 40 in the global professional rankings. Breaking into the top 40 at 20 years old is not just a nice little statistic to read on a sports website. It is an absolute terrifying warning shot fired directly across the bow of every single player on the WTA Tour. Reaching that specific ranking tier completely changes the entire geometry of a tennis career. You no longer have to grind through miserable remote qualifying draws. You start getting the respect, the prime court placements, and the favorable seedings. The global tennis media completely exploded in the aftermath of Rome. The very same European and American analysts who heavily doubted her physical endurance just months prior were suddenly scrambling over each other on live television to praise her generational talent. The momentum she built from that single defining victory created an unstoppable runaway freight train of pure confidence. Her subsequent opponents no longer looked across the net and saw a vulnerable young challenger from Southeast Asia. They looked across the net and saw an absolute dominant force of nature who had completely mastered her own professional destiny. The fear in their eyes before the coin toss even happened was incredibly palpable. The locker room dynamics shifted completely because everyone suddenly realized the hype was actually a terrifying reality. What unfolded during the Italian Open of 2026 reaches far beyond the strict boundaries of a simple professional tennis tournament. Alex Eala is actively rewriting the fundamental genetic code of Asian sports on the absolute highest international level. She is single-handedly proving that world-class elite tennis does not exclusively belong to the established, wealthy powerhouses of Europe and America. She is the blindingly bright torchbearer for a completely new, fearless generation of athletes from the Philippines and across all of Southeast Asia. Try to imagine the massive cultural impact of her victory. Right at this very second, there are thousands of young kids waking up at 3 in the morning in Manila watching her highlights on tiny glowing phone screens. They see a champion who shares their exact heritage, absolutely dominating the European elite on their own prestigious territory. Every single time she laces up her shoes and steps onto the court, she carries the heavy, beautiful dreams of all those kids who finally have a hero that looks exactly like them. She shattered the thick glass ceiling of Western prejudice so violently that the falling pieces are still hitting the ground today. The historic victory in Rome was the ultimate, undeniable proof that she truly belongs among the legendary giants of the modern sport. She faced down the absolute darkest shadows of doubt and emerged on the other side forged in pure steel. But this breathtaking monumental rise forces us to ask a much larger and far more exciting question right now. If a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines can completely conquer the historic clay of Rome and bring the global tennis establishment to its knees, then what is her actual final limit? Will she be the one to finally bring a Grand Slam singles championship trophy home to her wildly passionate nation? Will she completely redefine what is physically possible for an Asian athlete on the grass courts of Wimbledon or the hard courts of New York? The incredible journey ahead is guaranteed to be the most thrilling roller coaster ride in modern sports history, and you absolutely need to be right here to witness every single miraculous step of it. Hit that subscribe button right now and join our community because we are going to meticulously track every single twist and turn of her historic pursuit of greatness, and you absolutely do not want to miss the exact moment she finally takes over the entire world.